Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Well, last week I had a show with the founder of TKS, the Knowledge Society, a great school for teenagers, an after-school type of school for teenagers. And he talks about he wants to find those teenagers and motivate them, the ones that will change life for billions and really have an impact. And it was quite an inspirational show. And I said to Nadeem Nathu, can I meet some of your students and find out, what they think about the program? So he agreed to do it. So tonight we've got the second edition of the TKS show with three students. So first of all, we have Isha, who is a 17-year-old blockchain and machine learning developer. She's interning at CIBC after wrapping up her first year in the innovative program where students are initially exposed to exponential technologies. We've got Cameron. Cameron is a 16-year-old Immuno Genomics researcher at the Princess Margaret Cancer Research Center, biotech enthusiast, and he's just finished the second year program in TKS known as Activate. And finally, we've got Hannah. And Hannah, I don't have an outline here of you. How come? You're going to have to introduce yourself, Hannah. So please, Hannah, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I've actually been in TKS 3 years now, so I'm probably going to be like the oldest one out of the three kids. So I came to Canada from Vietnam by myself when I was 16 years old, and I was like a teenager, didn't know what to do. And then I joined TKS to focus on genetic engineering, where I worked on a project to use CRISPR to reverse aging in fruit flies. And then after that, I dove deeper into machine learning and worked at Princess Margaret Hospital to help in cancer patients. And now I'm currently working on my first ever startup in real estate.
Awesome. A startup in real estate. That sounds so different than everything else you just described.
Yeah, I think there is actually like a common thread there, because I think for me, what I'm super passionate about is how you can use these emerging technologies to apply to different industries. And then in real estate, I think it's a super architect industry. And then basically you can, like the tech I'm using is essentially merging, the principles of evolution in genetics with machine learning so that you can evolve different building structures within your computer in order to evaluate which property has high potential on others than others. So even though it seems like so different, I think there's actually a similarity there. And I think being able to work on it will help me refine my execution skills, which I think is really important no matter what I want to work on in the future.
Well, I did a really interesting show on some people talking about how urban life is going to change because of COVID-19. So maybe we'll come back and ask you that later on about how you think COVID-19 is going to impact real estate. So Isha, you're just finished your first year, is that correct?
Yep,
just wrapping it up. Why did you choose TKS?
So initially, I learned about TKS through an ad from one of my school clubs called DECA, which is just like a business competition. And what initially drew me in was just seeing a bunch of really young people like myself doing these really cool projects. And at first I was really intimidated, and that got me kind of held back and I didn't want to apply. But I saw one of my friends in one of the ad videos for TKS, and that really drew me in. And what really drew me in was just the fact that these young people were working on really, really cool things. And that was something really different than school. So that's what really got me interested in TKS.
Awesome. And what about you, Cameron?
Yeah, so from a young age, I wanted to be Indiana Jones. So I think that
you and me both. I wanted to be Indiana Jones.
Yeah, but I think that the important thing to note is not like a normal kid would want, like the hat, the whip, and the leather jacket, but like I wanted to become fluent in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. I wanted to fill dozens of notebooks with different notes on ancient civilizations. And I think that the ambition for discovery is something that stuck with me throughout my whole life until now. And I think what TKS, for me, I wanted to be Indiana Jones and I wanted to do all these things. And I had this passion for health sciences. I wanted to cure cancer. I wanted to cure these rare diseases. I wanted to really push myself out into the world, but I was lost. I didn't really know how to do that. And I found out about TKS. And I think that what really caught me is that it's meant for kids like me. You know what I mean? Like for all of my life, there was nothing for something like me. I was kicked out of the ROM once because I wanted to do a rubbing, right? I wanted to get into the real world, but there was nothing for those types of kids. And I think what TKS really allowed me and so many others to do was express that side of themselves, you know, express the side that's ambitious and really wants to do stuff in the world despite that they're young.
Awesome. Cameron, what is immunogenomics?
Yeah, so I'm really driven by the ever too common problem of cancer. And what immunogenomics is it's easier to explain through immunotherapeutics. So with cancer right now, there's a large craze around immunotherapies, using your immune system to target cancer. It's kind of your army of your body, and they can go out, target a cancer cell, and ultimately kill the cancer. There's been major developments in it with adoptive cell transfer, you know, taking your immune cells out, expanding them and entering them back in, different other therapeutics such as CAR T cells. And what immunogenomics is that we have all these great therapies that are being created right now, but we need a way to analyze them. We need a way to track their efficacy in patients. We need ways to monitor a patient's response to these therapies. And that's where immunogenomics comes in. So genomics is study of your DNA, you know, that's inspired genetic sequencing, genetic editing, all these new advancements that have come around. And then if you combine immunogenomics, it's sequencing your T cells. So you get a large set of information about your T cells. So with that, I'm working with the Princess Margaret Cancer Research Tower with Dr. Pugh, who's one of the top 1% of cited researchers, and I'm working with them to try and use immunogenomics to track immunotherapies in patients to ultimately increase their response to these therapies.
Awesome. Well, tonight we're chatting with 3 students from TKS, the Knowledge Society, and their founder, Nadeem. We're talking with Cameron, Isha, and Hannah. We're going to take a quick break and come right back. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. This is my second show on TKS, the Knowledge Society. Last week I had Nadeem Nathu on, the founder of TKS, and he was really quite inspirational in talking about why he started the school and what he was trying to teach the students, which are all high school students. And so I said to Nadeem, can we talk to some of them? And here they are. We've got Cameron Kerr, we've got Isha Ulak, and Hannah Lee. And Cameron just told us about immunogenomics, something he's working on at Princess Margaret Cancer Center. Isha, tell us about one of the projects that you've been working on.
Yeah, so I initially started off the year working in blockchain. So if you guys are familiar with cryptocurrencies like Ethereum or Bitcoin, blockchain is the underlying technology. And what it is it's basically an immutable ledger. So it's a type of ledger that you can't change, and it's extremely secure. And I thought, why can't we use this for things like government infrastructure? So things like voting, property registration, birth registration. So I started off really diving into that whole area, building dApps. So dApps are decentralized applications, and they're just apps on top of the blockchain. And then they inherit all the properties that the blockchain has. So being immutable, being transparent, and being decentralized. So most networks have one node in the middle, one computer in the middle, and it controls the entire network. Whereas a decentralized network has a bunch of nodes or computers, and they're all interconnected. So there's no one node in control, and that's really good for security purposes because it takes more than one point of failure for the network to become vulnerable if it gets hacked. And this is really important when it comes to government infrastructure because you're dealing with some people's most precious data. So I was really passionate about birth registration because I come from Pakistan, and in Pakistan, less than 60% of the population has a birth certificate, which to me was just insane. And it affects people down the line in things like voting, getting a passport, and a bunch of other things. And that was just a really big project that I wanted to tackle. So I made a couple proof of concepts, birth registration dApps and property registration dApps. And now I'm going more into computers how to learn on their own, specifically machine learning and deep learning. And I did things in object detection, so how self-driving cars see, and these things like neural style transfer, so just playing with different images and classifying them. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, you used a term, immutable something or other. What was that term?
A ledger, so basically records.
And what does immutable records or ledgers mean?
So immutable basically means that you can only change it, but in a way that all the changes are visible. So there's always a constant record of what's being changed, and it's basically tamper-proof. So if anyone wants to go in and change something, everyone on the network would be notified that something's being tampered. So a good analogy might be a Google Doc. You can see all the changes and you're able to change things, but there's no way of going back and deleting the history of the changes that have been made. So that's the whole idea. It's tamper-proof, and everyone in the network can see the changes that have been made.
So, we've been having a lot of discussion about why can't we have voting by computers. Is this the solution to voting?
There's a lot of talk in the blockchain community about how we can use blockchain for voting. And I've made a couple projects myself, but I think when it comes to using a new emerging technology in government, there's a lot of obstacles. One is just general adoption, getting people to use it and just trust in the system. So I think it is possible, but with technology it takes a lot of mass cooperation. And I think that's something that we're not ready for. And I find government is usually pretty slow when it comes to change. But in the future, hopefully, blockchain will be a part of a lot of government systems. There's one country called Estonia, a small European country, and majority of their government systems are on the blockchain. And we're seeing countries like, we're seeing cities like Dubai slowly transition to have more of their government documents on the blockchain. So that's really exciting. So we are seeing change, just slow change.
Excellent. What about you, Hannah? Tell us about one of your projects.
Yeah, so I've worked on many in the past, and one of the current projects I'm working on is in PropTech. So I just want to give you guys, I guess, a brief of what the problem actually is all about. So essentially, there in Toronto right now, we're short by 26,000 houses. And if you really think about how many properties there are in Toronto, there are more than 5 million properties. And then a lot of them are underdeveloped. But there's like no current good way for you to actually find these underdeveloped properties, whether it's government land or school or abandoned houses, and be able to visualize according to zoning bylaws what are the possible building structures that we can build on top of this property. So essentially what I'm working on is a solution where you can essentially scrape both city data, property by property, analyze which one is underdeveloped, and help you visualize what you could build on it. And inspiration, I guess, like the technology behind this whole solution to this problem, I actually got the inspiration from working on another project in TKS where I use this thing called genetic algorithm to evolve different structures for soft robotics. And essentially it's super interesting because basically when you have hard robot, you only have 2 or 3 degrees of freedom. So you can move like up and down, left and right, and so on and so forth. But then if you have soft robot, you can imagine it as like elephant trunk where it's super flexible. And this actually has a lot of benefits in different structures, in different applications. So if you think about somebody trying to do surgery, if you have a hard robot that's super rigid, it's going to be really hard for you to actually go to areas that are super granular in the human body. But if you have soft robots, it's going to be much easier for you to maneuver such actions, right? So the thing about soft robot though is because it has infinite degree of freedom, you can move left, right, up, down, 360 degrees. There's so many ways you can move a soft robot. How are we actually able to evolve like a morphology or a structure that is optimized for this task? So essentially, that question is super interesting because if you think about humans, how did human even evolve? It's genetics, right? So you basically, are a monkey and then you adapt to whatever environmental stresses around you and you're able to evolve to the way that we look today. So that was the principle that I apply in, I guess, machine learning or genetic algorithm, which is you initialize a populations of a bunch of random robotic structures, soft robotic structures, and you let them compete with one another in a computer. And there are like a lot of code that is involved. And then eventually you let these soft robotic structures optimize for a single objective. For example, be able to walk on Mars. And that was pretty much the project that I was involved with. I was working on when it was part of TKS. Yeah.
Awesome. So let me ask you, you guys are all brilliant. Do you come to TKS brilliant, or does TKS help make you brilliant. How is TKS structured, and what is it about the process of learning at TKS that has helped you guys achieve these fascinating things in these projects? Anybody?
So for me, I was not even interested in tech before TKS. I just really wanted to solve big problems in the world relating to government stuff. But when I came into TKS, I realized that a lot of the problems in the world can be solved with technology. And a huge part of the process of learning in TKS is we do these things called explorers. So they're getting a high level understanding of a bunch of different technologies, and then we do a focus, which is basically diving really deep into one of these technologies. So for example, I did a blockchain and a machine learning focus, and that's really building projects, writing articles, and just going really deep into whatever technology. So another really good analogy is—
Isha, let me interrupt. I apologize. Do you do that on your own? Do you do it as part of a class? Do you do it as a part of a group? Tell me how you do that.
So we do it on our own. Before TKS, I never did that. And TKS really sets that whole structure. And we do it not during sessions. So the sessions are about 3 hours on the weekends, but majority of the learning is actually done on our own. So we'll have videos and articles that we can read on our own, but there's no homework in TKS. It's all resources that are available to you, but we get to choose whether or not we want to look into them. And that's just like the whole process of exploring things.
So what is it about TKS that motivates you to explore then? Because you could have gone and explored anyway.
I think a huge part for me was just the environment. So in school, it's a really competitive environment, and most people are just trying to optimize for that number they get on the corner of their paper. Whereas in TKS, it's really about building projects and doing things that have a real impact in the world. And before TKS, when I was in school, I was, I guess, another box checker, doing clubs only for the sake of having like padding on my resume. Whereas in TKS, it was everyone's working on really cool things. So like you heard on the call, Cameron is working on really cool things, and so is Hannah. And it's just having that environment where everyone's working on cool things is really, really helpful in pushing you towards something.
Hannah, you've been there the longest. You tell me what you think about the structure of the program.
Yeah, if I were to be super honest, I think there's like zero chance I would get to where I am today without TKS.
Zero
So I think,
chance.
like zero, definitely zero. Because before I came to TKS, I was like, you know, my parents are Asian, so they always want me to become a doctor, you know, and I was actually pretty set on becoming a doctor when I first came to TKS. And then after I went to the first year, which exposes you to different emerging technologies and teaches you mindset. I realized that if you are a doctor, like say every week you have, you know, 100 people, 200 people. And if you were to do that process for your whole life, I calculated, and I think my math is accurate, the maximum number of people you can impact is like 250,000 people if you just see 100 patients every single week. And to me, that wasn't the biggest, like the number that I was aiming for. And then when I came to TKS, I learned that by leveraging these different technologies, you're actually able to, you know, like work on a software, work on a hardware project that solves the problem, and you're able to impact like 1 billion people within the same amount of time. So that was I guess like the biggest motivation for me, because it was like, wow, I can spend the same amount of time, you know, still learning different things that TKS exposed me to, because otherwise I would just only know biology, right? Because that's what you need to learn to become a doctor.
So
now
what you're saying is that part of the structure is that it forces you to expose yourself to lots of different things?
Yeah, so basically, I think what's super unique is that I was exposed to different technologies. So for example, machine learning, genetics, genomics, and a bunch of different topics. And if you were to think about what's the best person in genomics, there are like a lot of them. What's the best person in machine learning, there are also a lot of them. But if you think about the intersection between these different technologies, it's like a Venn diagram, right? The number of people that actually share the expertise between these different areas are a lot smaller. And I think thanks to TKS, I was able to develop, I guess, unique perspectives on what kind of technology I'm drawn towards. So if you were to ask, I guess, a geneticist, they wouldn't say, I want to evolve a soft robot within a computer using machine learning. And if you were to ask a machine learning engineer, they wouldn't say, I want to use genetics principles within evolving different structures. But then if you were to combine these two, I guess, domains, you're able to develop unique perspectives that other people wouldn't be able to perceive otherwise. So that is something that I thought was pretty unique about TKS. But that was like the first year where you get exposed to these different technologies. In the second year, which Cameron just went through, we essentially dived really deep into the value chain of different industries and looked into what are some of the world's biggest problems. Because if you really think about, problems you hear every day, like hunger and stuff like that, it's like mostly an outcome. So like affordable housing, it's like an outcome. Nobody thinks of affordable housing as like lacking the ability to find underdeveloped properties to develop these structures on, So I think in the second year, what you really develop is the ability to dive deeper into different industries and do root cause analysis on various problems that you hear. And then on the third year, which is Disrupt, which I just finished, it's about execution. So they teach you about, marketing, how to hire people, essentially product management, like how to lead a team, like all these things that are important for execution. So it's like that phase where you bring an idea from 0 to 1. So 0 being just an idea in your head. That's really fun in your head, but it's not really helping anyone. And then 1 being actually something that's tangible that can make real impact and add real value to people in their everyday life. So it's definitely a process, and 3 years is a long time, but I'm happy to have been.
Cameron, this sounds fascinating. What's it like for you to go? What's the environment like? What's the community like at TKS?
Yeah, so I think that one word that describes the perk of the community at TKS for me is it's resourceful, right? And I would say I'm a unique case to be in the program for this long, but to not be active in the community in my very first part of TKS. So for the first half of my first year in Innovate, because I was really ambitious at the start and I was so focused on myself, I kind of just wanted to do my own project. I did different genetic editing projects with E. coli, did different bioinformatics projects, and I was making some progress, but at the start of January, I said, you know what, I'm going to give this community thing a try. I've been avoiding it for long enough. I'm going to see if there's this large impact on myself. So on the first day I met up with different people from TKS outside of the sessions, of course. I met this 2 people named Michael and Ahmed. And they were working on this project kind of similar to me about extending or decreasing the process of aging. So allowing people to live longer with epigenetics. And I thought that was cool. So I kind of talked to them a little bit about it and then went home. The next day I came to them again and I kept talking to them about this project about reversing aging. And I kept talking about it and talking about it. And I'm not only just learning about it, but at the end of the first week of talking to people at TKS, I joined their team to develop this project. And only a month later from that, we were first place at a U of T research proposal competition for high school students to develop research proposals and pitch them against different PhD students. And I think...
I apologize for interrupting, but let me try to bring you out a bit. So is it more collaborative, less competitive than school?
Yeah, definitely. I think that what's unique about TKS is it's not just a friend group to keep you going like in school, but these people are on similar journeys as you. They want to impact billions and they care about your success just as much as they care about their own. And I think that allows this collaborative environment that TKS has created. So it was never a competition of see who can complete the area of expertise the fastest, know the most. It was always about how can you get different people on different projects and how can you really get yourself out into the world with others.
Awesome. Isha, how would you be different if you hadn't gone to TKS?
Before TKS, I wanted to be a lawyer, mainly based off of what I've seen on TV from shows like Suits, How to Get Away with Murder. But what I realized, similar to Hannah, was being a lawyer or being, I don't know, an accountant, there's a set amount of there's a cap to the amount of people you can impact. Whereas with technology, you could impact so many people, and technology makes a lot of things democratized, especially with the internet. We're living in an age where anyone can basically access the same types of education as people from top level universities, which is a huge game changer. And we're just able to even out the playing field. And I think that's something that really excited me, just the fact that with technology, you can impact way more people. So short answer, I would be a lawyer. And I'd probably be still in competitive environments, and I'd be doing a lot of clubs in school that I'd be doing maybe to check boxes off. And I think I'd also be a lot less confident. I think when we talk about TKS, a lot of people think of it as like a tech program, but it really is a human accelerator. And it's hard to put that into words, but it's just, how can you be the best version of yourself? So how can you be more confident? How can you care less about what other people think? And I think the way we really do that is learning about different types of philosophies. So we have philosophers of the week that we can look into. We have readings, and there's just so many small things that add up. So for example, we do presentations. I remember the first presentation I did, it was like really bad. And I was like, my voice was nervous, my hands were sweaty. But slowly and slowly, I just got more confident. And that's just through, one, learning more philosophies and learning that like people don't care about X, Y, Z as much. But also just doing over and over again. That was really a big change.
Awesome. Tonight we're chatting with Cameron, Isha, and Hannah about TKS, the Knowledge Society, a school for high school students after school. We're going to take a break and come back and talk a little bit more about how this is different than regular school. Stay with us.
Hi.
Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I had the opportunity to go down to TKS on one of their Sunday afternoon, this was before COVID-19, sessions, and listen to some of the presentations. And I was really quite impressed with what was going on. One of it was Nadeem, who's on the show tonight, was speaking to a small group. But then we went into a bigger group, and it was the students that got up and presented. And I was really surprised at and impressed at how articulate the student was that got up and spoke, and how deep that person's knowledge was about the topic area. And it almost more was like a university setting to me, and a very good, high quality, almost business school or law school type of university setting than a high school setting to me. So Hannah, you've been there for 3 years. I wonder, how do you compare TKS to your regular high school?
So I think it's really different, because usually when you go to because I'm in university now as well. So when you go to high school or when you go to university, it's almost like this, time in a day that you have to put away for school, do your homework, whatever. But I think for TKS, it's more of like a lifestyle. So, in the morning when you wake up, you have your morning routine. And the only reason why I even developed the idea of having a morning routine was like because one of the TKS founders, Naveed, was like recommending it to all of us. And then essentially, so it's super different in the sense that it's
What's
like a
your morning routine?
lifestyle you live. My morning routine?
Yes.
Yeah, so I wake up, I meditate, I drink a glass of water, I reflect on, my yesterday, did it go well, did it not go well, why didn't it go well, without actually overthinking. That's really important. And then what can I be doing better today to hit my metric of success?
Okay, so number one, you've got a morning routine. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, and then I guess there are so many things. I think in university, so usually in a school setting, I think people overvalue technical knowledge. So you go there and then they sort of teach you about, how to do calculus, how to do linear algebra, how quantum physics works. But I think for TKS, what they teach you is the mindset. So maybe you don't even know, quantum physics now, or maybe you don't even know genetic engineering now. But then if you just have the mindset of having confidence and figure it out, we call it a figure it out mindset, then you'll be able to dive really deep into these seemingly difficult topics and I guess overcome the initial intimidation to become an expert in it. So I think it's something that university doesn't really teach you, which is the value aspects of who you are and how you do things. Another thing that I think is really valuable about TKS is that I would never, I guess, have experience in university is like different philosophy. So for example, we learned something called stoicism. And basically, essentially what it means is that no matter what happens to you, you have to be calm and stoic and be able to control your reaction to whatever problems that face you. And I remember myself, I guess 1 or 2 years ago, I was like a super emotional girl. And then, I would cry if I don't have a good grade. I would cry over not being perfect, like these things that seem so different from who I am now. And then I guess through several years of going through TKS, I was able to develop confidence and stoicism and over the year and be able to evolve as a person. And I don't think in university there would be ever a professor who says, well, why are you crying about, this mark, or why are you crying about XYZ, right? I think people are very focused on helping you being a good engineer or being a good technical person, but not enough on just the character and the value of who you are as a person.
Almost sounds like you learn just as much about your character as you do about technical topics.
Yeah, I guess.
What about you, Isha? How does it compare to high school?
Like I mentioned before, it's super collaborative, the environment, but we also learn it's a lot less memorization based, which is what our school system usually is nowadays. And it's a lot more breaking down problems that don't have solutions to them. And that's really hard. And we don't really get taught that in school. It's usually memorize X, Y, Z for the test or learn calculus. But in TKS, we break down really complex problems using mental models. For example, first principles is a mental model where you look at a really big complex idea and you break it down into its most fundamental parts, and you get a really good understanding of those fundamentals. And then, for example, what's a big problem in the world? Climate change, right? You break it down into, well, what are the biggest contributors to climate change? And then what countries are the biggest contributors? And you keep on breaking down problems, and that's something that school doesn't really teach you, mental models and frameworks over memorization. I think that's a really big part of TKS, just breaking down problems.
Breaking down problems. So learning how to problem solve rather than just memorizing things.
Mm.
Okay. Cameron, what's the change in technology in an area that you're interested in that excites you the most in the next 5-10 years?
I think that for me, it's synthetic immunology. That might seem like a big word, but what it basically means is instead of going off, I guess, the status quo of our immune system, going off the normal types of cells that are in the immune system, you can engineer these types of cells. So kind of taking an engineering mindset to biology. And we've seen this with CAR T cell therapy. So CAR T cell therapy is taking the chimeric antigen receptor, the CAR, and applying it to your T cells and entering into a cancer patient. So it has a better chance at targeting the cancer. And I think that what you can see in the future, this CAR T cell therapy is really just a taste. It's not anything that will be huge in the future, because I believe that with the progression of synthetic immunology, we'll find technologies that are way better than CAR T cell therapy. And I think that what the world looks like after synthetic immunology is implemented is really a world without cancer. Because I think that we're developing different techniques and we're developing such a deep understanding of how biology works that once we're able to engineer that and capitalize on it, I don't think we'll ever look back. So
you think we actually could have a world without cancer in the future?
Yeah. So I think that
well, you'll certainly impact the lives of billions if you're able to help us with that, sir.
Definitely. I promise. Yeah. I think that cancer is a curable disease. I don't think it's an interesting disease. It's, although it impacts and hurts so many, it's very interesting. And I think that it's really evolved with us, and it's really a part of the human body. But I don't think that will limit us. I think that we have developed so many different technologies and developing such a rich understanding of cancer through even the past decade, that I think if we look a decade, 2 decades into the future, I think that that'll be an amazing future where we have such a deep control of cancer.
Hannah, what about you? What's an innovation in an area that you're focused on, that you're really excited about, that you think will change the world?
So I used to work in cancer as well, and I was gonna take Cameron's answer, but he already said that, so I'll say something else. So essentially, besides that, I think something that's really exciting for me is like fertility or reproductive equity. So usually I remember when I was a kid, and I was talking to my mom, and she was pregnant with my second baby, like with her second baby. And then I was asking her, well, dad has a big stomach too, why can't he carry the baby? Right? And it was a super innocent question. And I'm not proposing that men should carry babies, but I think what's super interesting is that I think that there are a lot of areas in female and health tech that I think lack innovation. So for example, right now we have birth control. But then, for example, say that you're 29, you're 30, and then for me, I don't think I would ever get married until I'm, 31, 32, and then you can't have a baby after you're 35. So I think for that period of time, if you have a way to, I guess, like freeze eggs or be able to detect different diseases before they even happen, like cervical cancer, I think that's going to be something that's really innovative, and it would definitely satisfy my 8-year-old self asking my mom, why can't my dad carry a baby? So technology that advances reproductive equity for women, I think that's something that I'm really interested in.
There's a fascinating book. I can't remember the author right now, but it's an Israeli author who's written a book called Homo Deus, that talks about the technology that you're describing almost in the future creating godlike men. Are you worried about that?
Sorry, what do you mean by godlike men?
He argues that what's going to end up happening is the technology that you're talking about is going to be available to only some people. They'll use that technology to create superhumans. Not everyone will have it available. There'll be some humans that will be almost godlike and others that won't. It's a fascinating review. And what he talks about actually is that it'll be comparable to the way humans acted to the Neanderthals, that there'll be one group that will be superhuman and another group that aren't superhuman, because the technology will end up being very helpful, because it'll help you in all the ways that you've talked about, improving brains, getting rid of cancers, getting rid of diseases, but there's some significant moral issues associated with it.
Yeah, I think definitely coming from Vietnam, affordability is a big issue, because it's like $1 here can be worth like 1 day of work there, right? So I think that right now, when we're in the early stages of developing the technology, keeping that issue of affordability in mind would definitely be super important. But of course, I don't think that it's going to be the reality until we scale the technology until a degree where it has high enough volume that allows more people to use it. Because right now it's still in its very nascent stage. Yeah.
Well, if you ever get a chance to read that book, I'd love to have a follow-up conversation with you about it, okay?
Sure.
Excellent. What about you, Aisha? What technology, what innovation in an area that you're interested in is going to change the world that you're excited about?
I think artificial intelligence is a really big buzzword that people throw around, but it literally has the power to innovate in so many fields. And it's not just artificial intelligence, it's the intersections of different exponential technologies I'm really excited for. So like you guys mentioned, like gene editing, what about if we could combine CRISPR, which is being able to cut out certain genes, with artificial intelligence, and you could find different like gene pairs, and that's really exciting. Also, what if you can combine artificial intelligence with brain-computer interfaces, basically being able to transfer knowledge from artificial intelligence to humans. So we know that throughout history, human intelligence has remained the same, whereas computers are getting exponentially smarter. And like the book you were mentioning before by Yuval, he brings up a lot of ethical issues of what if that we have AI that takes over humans because we just become so less intelligent. But I think that's very far from now. The concept of artificial general intelligence, so an AI that can basically act fully as a human, does not need any assistance whatsoever, is very far from now. But instead, we should be looking at how can we use AI to solve some really big problems in the world right now that we couldn't before. So I'm really excited about AI and its intersections.
Awesome. I've got to come back to something you mentioned earlier. I apologize. You said you were looking and trying to figure out how driverless cars see. How do driverless cars see?
Yeah, so they use an object detection algorithm. Most self-driving cars use YOLO, which is an object detection algorithm that basically creates a bounding box around an object and classifies it. So for example, there's a boy on a bike in front of me. It'll create a bounding box around the boy on the bike, and then so we'll be able to figure out where that boy is in to the car, but also classifying what it is. So you don't just need to be able to know how far the object is, but you also want to be able to know what the object is. And that's something that artificial intelligence can really help out with, that I'm really excited for, especially considering all the deaths that occur annually because of human error. Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm very enthused by each one of you and the ideas that you've got, the things that you're working on. Cameron, I interviewed a oncologist yesterday who told me that lung cancer is the biggest killer of preventable diseases in the world. And so therefore, if you can help get rid of a world with cancer, I think that's fantastic. Isha, I think that that artificial intelligence, I don't want it taking over our brains, and I don't want it to actually become more important than humans, but I do think you're right that it'll end up changing something that used to just compute data into something that actually comes up with solutions that are far better than they have been in the past. And Hannah, I just think some of the things that you've been talking about are spectacular, and so therefore the three of you are very impressive young adults, and I look forward to the impact that you're going to have on this world. We're going to take a break. Stay with us. We're going to come back with some closing comments in just a minute. Thanks. Well, welcome back to our show tonight with three students from the Knowledge Society, TKS, and their founder, Nadeem Nathu, who has been very good. He's just been quiet the whole time, which I'm very impressed with. It's a good instructor when he knows his students are doing a very adequate job, if not a spectacular job in what's going on. Cameron, I want to ask you a question. You've been there for what, 2 years at TKS?
Yeah.
Is it good? Where do you think it's going to go in 5 or 10 years? What do you think the implications of this kind of a school are for education?
Yeah, I think good might be a little bit of an understatement for TKS. So I think that it's really impacted hundreds of kids by this point, and it's not been around for that long. So this is the first year that the final program Disrupt, the first year that those kids have technically graduated, if you say. And I think that as we get more people trained in this program and still connected to the community, I think what we really have in the next 5 to 10 years is a lot of people who are in a collaborative environment going out and solving the world's biggest problems. And that's the vision of TKS, right? And it's not something that we're gradually approaching. It's something that we're exponentially approaching. I think we're very close to it. And I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, I know less about it than Nadeem, but the goal is to get to all major cities in the world, and also just to have this network of people where I can really just say, hey, I would like to do something with genetic engineering and its ethics. And I can reach out to someone halfway across the world and talk to them about genetic engineering ethics, and we can have a company in the future. We can solve these problems, or I can have a role in that. And I think that with this environment that TKS is creating, that's possible.
Isha or Hannah?
Yeah, I think Cameron mentioned a really good point, just being able to reach out to a bunch of kids around the world. TKS, I believe, is in over 6 different cities. and we do these things called brain dates. So we'll hop on a call, and we'll have one topic that we want to discuss, and it's just a great knowledge add for both people. And as we have more and more alumni, it's just going to be a huge network of really strong, ambitious kids wanting to solve problems. And you can find your next co-founder. You might work at someone's company, and there's just so many opportunities. And I think it's a really great network that I'm excited for more kids to join.
Hannah, you're from Vietnam, I think you said.
Yeah, I'm from Vietnam, yeah.
Robert Putnam, a famed American academic, wrote a book on social capital and called Bullying Alone in America. And he said the biggest divide was people that were part of clubs, historically was people that were part of clubs and not part of clubs. And now recently he's written another book that says the biggest problem is people that have got access to education versus people that don't have access to really good, high quality education. And you end up having this one part of society that are really well educated and another part of society that aren't, and they're going to end up being the lower class. How can we take TKS to everyone in Vietnam or the Philippines or Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean, my mom is down to help with TKS everyone to expand to those areas. But basically, I think TKS this year has a virtual program now. So I'm not sure, Nadim can probably speak more to it more accurately than I do. But I think this virtual program can help reach a lot of kids around the world. And essentially, I've been telling my sister to, just do TKS stuff without being actually in TKS. So I think that the virtual program can enable that. And essentially, I don't know, just creating connections with these developing countries and building the program there.
If I checked in with you in 10 years, where are you going to be, Hannah?
Me? Well,
Yeah.
I can tell you my best case scenario. So I think that from my best case scenario, I would have wanted to sold a company and be working on my, second or third company on a really big problem. And I don't know what the problem is yet. It's 10 years is a very long time, and my knowledge can evolve, the problems that I deeply care about can evolve, but I do want to be working on something that's super meaningful and potentially with another TKS student.
Cameron, where are you going to be in 10 years?
10 years, I think I'll be curing cancer, curing different diseases, because it's not only the thing that I find the most fun, it's the thing I find the most fulfilling, but it also does something great for the world, which I take a lot of pride in.
I'm in the private equity business, Cameron. When you create that company that's going to cure cancer, come to me and I'm going to put some money into it, okay?
For sure, yeah.
Awesome. Isha, where are you going to be in 10 years?
Ooh, I really just want to go back kind of to my roots in Pakistan, and work on projects that help solve really big problems, not only in the world, but especially in Pakistan. So bringing those blockchain and property registration and birth registration projects into reality, and hopefully just solving big problems in the world. Hopefully not just a lawyer. Hopefully, yeah.
Awesome. Nadim, let me give you the last word to you. Thank you so much for what you're doing in setting up TKS and bringing us these students, but also the program to everyone else. Where are you going to be in 10 years, sir?
When I think about why we started TKS, it really is how can we build the infrastructure and train young people to solve really important problems in the world. And so for me, you're seeing a lot of the fruits of the labor right now, but how can we scale this globally? And how can it be such that the next time you call me or in 10 years, I have thousands of young people around the world that are working on some pretty incredible things. And so, you mentioned being in a couple of different cities around the world, not just in developed countries. We absolutely want to be in places like the Indias of the world, China, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and also places that don't have the luxury of being English speaking by default. And the reason why I think that's important is because most of the good content in the world is in English. And so a lot of these people are at a disadvantage. And so how can we play our part to get this, not only this content, but these mindsets and community and infrastructure to these areas of the world? I think it would be incredibly naive to think that it's going to be the people in developed countries that are only going to solve the problems for everybody else, right? I really think that human potential is definitely there around the world, but it's up to us, and it's our job to maximize the probability of students reaching that potential. So in terms of what it actually looks like building a digital platform to be available to anyone everywhere, being in over 50 plus cities, we're going to have a fund to invest in some of these young people, have the ability for them to pair some of these young people with jobs that are really impacting the world and changing the world and impacting billions. And then also on the research side. So the way that I think about where we want to be is working backwards. We want to impact billions. How do we do that? I think there are three ways: starting companies, working at a company that has the ability to do it, or in research. And it's our job to figure out how we can support these students to make sure that they can make that happen.
Well, I think you're supporting them well, and thank you very much for everything you're doing in that regard. So to Cameron Kerr, to Isha Urak, and to Hannah Lee, and to Nadeem Nathu, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour and telling us about the Knowledge Society, TKS. And for any of the listeners tonight or the watchers that are interested in checking out TKS, Nadeem, it's what, tks.com?
It's www.tks.world.
tks.world, and they're accepting applications right now, so check it out. Anyway, thanks everyone. I really appreciate it. Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.